Ooh. Hi, it's been a while. Sorry about that. Haven't recorded a Hooniverse podcast in a while, but that's gonna change soon. The Hooniverse podcast is coming back in a slightly different way. I'm gonna pop in from time to time when I can, but it has a new format. Two hosts, Dan Roth, formerly of Autoblog, and he's worked on the OEM side of the industry as well, and our own Ross Ballard, who misses doing his Off the Road Again podcast, are joining forces to revive the Hooniverse podcast with my full blessing, because somebody should do it. The idea here, though, is that they're going to be a bit more controlled in terms of delivering a story and a format per episode than when I did it, which makes it a whole lot more interesting than me rambling and Ron rambling and back when Chris would ramble back in those days, and even Blake back in the day too, even though those are some good ones back in the day. There's going to be a theme or a throughput for each episode, and they're going to kick you off with a little bit of a story and then just go into a more traditional podcast style. But at least there's a direction for each of these, and I think that could lead to a much more interesting and better podcast experience. So allow me to introduce the revived Hooniverse podcast, and I will pop in from time to time on these episodes. But for now, on this very first episode, take it away, Dan and Ross.
Ted Pelkey wants to share his feelings with you. Anytime, day or night, just spin past his place slightly northeast of Burlington, Vermont to see what's on his mind.
We met the rules, but they don't like it. So if they don't like it, it's just not going to work out.
When you've got an illuminated 7-foot-tall middle finger on a pole, it's pretty clear. The main issue is a denied building permit, but the giant obscene gesture? Totally allowed. The state can't stop it.
It's definitely a statement. I think it needs to stay there. Maybe we'll have a big finger worshiping party this summer. I don't know. I think it would be bigger than the Grateful Dead. I really do.
It's been there since 2018. And it's probably not what Vermont legislator Ted Riehle had in mind when he pushed through the state's billboard ban 55 years ago. The finger's not a billboard, and it doesn't advertise anything. But it is a sign of unintended consequences. Imagine you're a rich guy. A mid-20th century rich guy. It's 1952, you just sold your company, so what do? You buy Savage Island, a small chunk of land on Lake Champlain. To be fair, it's just $5,500, about $65,000 today, without electricity, running water, sewage, or sanitation. Definitely no bridge to the mainland. No big deal though, just build an airstrip for your plane and a dock for your boat. So you're a rich guy who flies his kids to school, and then you drive to your job. Oh, yeah. You're elected to the state legislature in 1965. This was a real guy. His name was Ted Riehle, and he must have been struck by the beauty of the landscape from a few hundred feet in the air and along the byways. And billboards must have worked his last nerve. Have you visited Vermont much? It's the New England state I've been to the least, but my impression is that the landscape is about the same as it was a century ago. In between then and now, though, there was a fight over visual pollution that ended in this billboard ban. It's still on the books. The basic idea was that one of the state's main commodities is beauty, and it was getting obscured by visual pollution, stuff you'd see in any state. One famous writer mused, "Behind the signboard lies Vermont." And this fight had been going on since the 1930s. And in 1968, Ted championed the ban. All that communing with nature must have left an impression on him. But because legislating is sausage making, they left a loophole big enough to flip a 700-pound pine bird through. It's not the only weird sculpture you'll see in the state, thanks to a provision for works of public art. It's probably not what Ted really intended, but I think he might respect the chutzpah. The law of unintended consequences is an unwritten, fundamental part of every government there has ever been or ever will be. Here's some more things that aren't going quite as planned. Welcome to Hooniverse. I'm Dan Roth. We don't have a name for the podcast yet as we get back into the groove, but we hope that you can help us out with that, and eventually we'll find a new name for our new thing. But welcome and thanks for tuning in, and I'll toss it to you, Ross, as you want to introduce yourself to the listeners.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. My name's Ross, Ross Ballett, and I'm a Hooniverse guy. And this is the new version of the unnamed Hooniverse podcast that we've concocted for everybody. So please do suggest actual names, because as of now, everything's made up and points don't matter.
Right.
So,
yes.
So today's topic, and this is setting the stage for what we aim to do as we move into this new format for the Hooniverse podcast. Today's topic is the law of unintended consequences and catching up with the law. So as Dan was discussing in our little intro bit, we are going to talk about things that happen, why they happen, and what happens after they happen, how that affects people, how that affects the planet, and how that affects us car enthusiasts. So our first story of the day comes from Automotive News, and it covers the topic of EV makers focusing on lower cost models. So we all know that electric vehicles came out of the gate expensive and hard to obtain, and because they have proliferated over the roughly 10 years that they have been available to the wider consumer base, things are changing on the side of the manufacturers. So what do you think, Dan? You think this is good, bad?
I think it's good that they're eventually getting to lower cost models. I think that they waited far too long, and now they're sort of getting their chickens are coming home to roost, or whatever kind of metaphor we want to use, because they all looked at Tesla and they all saw the amount of revenue that Tesla brings in, and they all saw the model. They'll talk about how going premium is the smart way to launch it, because you start off with the people who can afford it and they're early adopters and they have another car and they're enthusiastic and they will tolerate your terrible build quality and
terrible UI.
Yeah. Which, all of that has merit, but now they ignored the broader consumer market, where Tesla's been around. The Model S it's more than 10 years old, right?
Yeah. 14.
13, yeah.
14. It was 2011 or 2012. Yeah.
It's an adolescent. Yeah. And because of that, though, people are interested in other EVs. And there's other EVs on the market for them. But the problem is they all are still a bit premium. And there's the revenue reason for that, because they're expensive to build, they're a niche product, they're expensive to bring to market. There's no real way you're not going to lose money on them as an automaker, so you're trying to lose the least amount of money. I know if you dig into the quarterly financials of the automakers when they put them out there, you'll see that everybody loses money on EVs, kind of except for Tesla. And Tesla's
they're an exception across the board, though.
Yeah, and they play kind of fast and loose with the accounting numbers. So there was a 10-year period where they didn't make money, and that's the startup model: is you burn up somebody else's money as fast as you can to innovate and to be unique and to get out there and gobble up as much of the market as you possibly can. And you saw it with Uber was doing the same kind of thing. They were using other people's money to try to become the default by getting rid of taxpayer-funded transit. So it was like the same model.
That went great for Uber.
Yeah, they did an awesome job.
That was sarcasm.
But the thing you need to think about is not competing with them today. And this is, automakers basically, they look at what their rivals are doing and they they said, why aren't we doing that? And they copy that, especially if it's revenue positive. Everybody last year or the beginning of this year, they were really envious of Stellantis because Stellantis had great margins, almost approaching Tesla's.
Yeah.
And now look at them. Look, Stellantis is in the absolute toilet. And that's the short term, they have awesome margins this quarter.
Right. But that's the dance. The automakers are playing the long game financially, but in order to play the long game, you do have to play the short game.
Yeah.
It's a give and take. And with EVs especially, it's such a dynamic shift, even quarter to quarter in perception of what they are in terms of usability and customer friendliness. But the lower cost model is really the first shift of democratizing EVs since the Model S.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you got the S and the 3. Like the 3 is that is the Camry.
That is That's the S was the game changer. The 3 was the one that really moved things forward, moved the goalpost for sports fans listening.
Yeah, I can't get into that thing. Partially, I just don't like the quality.
But also sports or the Model 3.
The Model 3. Sorry. The UI is terrible, and it's for me, it's just not the right product. But I think it needs more competition, and that's you have the Bolt, which GM was stupid, and they were like, we're going to kill it. Oh, no, you know what? We have a great product and a great niche, and we're should not
lift it by a half inch and call it an SUV. Mm-hmm. Now we have another Bolt.
Yeah, I don't know. But that revenue chasing, they wasted a lot of time doing that, because what you really want to do in business, I always come at it with a sort of a scrappy mindset. So if you don't have the funding of those giants, or there's already somebody that's sucking all the oxygen out of the room in that market niche, it's just going to be that much more exponentially expensive for you to compete there. So go where they aren't. Why didn't we see an automaker besides Volkswagen who kind of got forced into it, and they did a really crappy job at building out the charging? Yeah,
they didn't. Getting forced into it was their own consequence of their own doing.
Oh yeah, you 100%. But they said a lot of things very contrite, and then they just completely just fumbled Electrify America to the point where everybody now is making deals with Tesla to get access to their supercharger network because it's great. And so now you're all strengthening your rival because they built the infrastructure while you idiots did whatever.
If we want to talk about unintended consequences and the likes, for those that are listening and don't know, the quickest summary of the story is Volkswagen created Dieselgate, and then as an outcome of Dieselgate, they effectively created Electrify America and kind of built the infrastructure, and then went, well, this isn't ours to maintain, so bye. Is that an accurate
it's about
summary?
Yeah. That's the long and short of it, yeah.
Well, I summarized, 5 to 10 years worth of stuff in 20 seconds, but
and it was more than $1 billion. It was a lot of money,
right?
And that's the biggest barrier, really, to EV ownership, because there's used EVs on the market. There's the Leaf. There's all you can buy used Model 3
for 10 years.
Yeah, for short money, and the charging infrastructure is still the struggle unless you're on the supercharger network. So nobody invested where they needed to because they thought of the product and they didn't think of the customer. Mm-hmm. And by not thinking of the customer and how are people going to use this thing? And we know that range anxiety is a problem. We're just going to build really expensive cars with enormous batteries, and you're going to be screwed if you can't charge it.
Right. And on the consumer side of things too, there also needs to be an etiquette change for EVs. Because you know how at a gas station, if let's say you put the gas pump in your car, you start it, you walk inside, you buy a snack, you walk out, it's done pumping, you get in your car and leave. I'm sure you've experienced this with EVs. People don't have that same etiquette just yet. And I don't know if it's an entitlement thing or a knowledge-based thing, because the technology and infrastructure isn't there, so you know exactly when you're done charging and whatnot. But a few times I've gone to charge electric press cars, and like we have an EV Go and an Electrify America and Tesla chargers downtown. Every single one is full with either somebody sitting in the car, like sleeping, or the car's charging and it's done charging and the person's nowhere to be seen.
Yep. It's just there like all day. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a top to bottom kind of shift that needs to happen. And I mean, it's going to take time. This whole thing will take time. And it's, we're seeing that in manufacturing costs coming down for EVs too, which is also the lower cost thing. You can sell cheaper cars if they're cheaper to make.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, they did it like, I think they put, and this is where the consequence of chasing Tesla has put them really behind the 8 ball. Like, obviously you look at the competition and you try to match them. But the other thing you need to do is stake out your territory. And they didn't do that. Nobody did that. Nobody built a good charging network. Now they're getting on it. They got Iona, where a bunch of the automakers have also banded together. So it's like,
oh really? I thought
it's a more
everything
legit.
Was just NACS and the NACS. I thought that was
just
accepted, and that was the way it was going.
Everybody's moving over to NACS for the connector, but the Iona charging network is, I think it's like GM, Renault, Nissan. There's a bunch of manufacturers that are all kind of getting together. So it's like another version of Electrify America. That's not doomed to fail, because they all realize, like, hey, charging infrastructure is expensive, and we haven't seen any of the petroleum companies step up. So we're going to build the product. We need to make it easy for people to use. Range anxiety really isn't a thing. That's what they answered for 10 years. They said, no, really, range anxiety is fine.
The average driver drives less than, what do they say, less than 40 miles a day around trip. Yeah. So why is range anxiety?
It's like it's not a thing, and they're seeing that too, where hybrids right now are high, because that's the hedge. So everybody who didn't kill their hybrids or has a plug-in, you're okay for now, but that's not going to last.
Right.
But nobody decided to come up with a small car or a different vehicle. They all decided to make something really similar. There's a bunch of electric SUVs. They're huge and expensive. And I know they're expensive. They're a premium product. But if you're going to take losses anyway, and you're eventually going to need to get to volume for a volume brand, Tesla's a premium brand. So they don't have to do volume like you do. But they still have to make money on volume too.
To do volume.
Yeah.
Which is great for them, at least. But and I think part of this whole notion of not being able to compete in this way is a lot of the manufacturers were trying to play offense and defense. And these are companies with limited resources. Even Ford or General Motors or Stellantis or Renault Nissan, they all have limited resources, whether that's manpower, whatever, or financial.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you can't do both. So like you said, trying to stake out your own or carve out your own corner of the EV market, you either go full force into that or do a little bit of that and then keep doing what you're doing, but you can't just do everything.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality of business, because, nothing's certain.
Well, I think they spent like the first, 5 to 7 years sort of dinking around with compliance cars too, where they were like, yeah, we kind of have to make this thing, so we're going to like whatever, where they really squandered that opportunity to make it great. And I know there's shareholder anxiety that you have to kind of deal with as well. Like, they're going to be mad, and the companies generally seem to be a little bit afraid of their own shadow, where they can't tell that story, or they're not telling that story in a really confident way to the press and to their internal people and to their shareholders, where it's like, yes, we know it's going to look bad for a little while, but this is called an investment. It will pay off eventually 10 years from now, not tomorrow. And you're going to have, like, we're going on a ride together. Trust us. You put us in these positions as CEO, CFO, strategist, technologist, and like, we know what we're doing.
And we will aim to avoid politics at all costs on this
Absolutely.
show. But 2009 and the consequences and fallout from the 2009 to 2011 era, especially in cars for the American automakers, and then seeing Tesla, fly out while everybody was still trying to get back on their feet. I think the automakers are also looking to the future with a little trepidation because they don't know what's going to happen. There's two very different forces that could come into office and that could create.
It's unstable. It creates it creates uncertainty, and it makes it really difficult when you're trying to plan your investments because you don't know whether you're going to have support. These are engines of the economy, and there are times where you're building an assembly plant, right? So if you're building domestic plants, there's a lot of hoops to jump through. There's a lot of regulation, and whether that regulation stays or goes, that has an effect. Whether new regulation happens, whether we get new tariffs that have been talked about, like all of that. Again, political footballs, so I'm not going to go into it, but it all plays a role in decision making. So they are in a very tough spot, and I think what they're doing now is, beyond Tesla being like the only competitor anybody cares about, is
right.
They're all looking at China because of the cheap EVs, and yes, that is an issue, and protectionist policy is only going to kind of keep that at the gate for so long. Eventually that they're going to sell into the US market, and
they'll get their prices down far enough so that the tariffs and import taxes and everything associated with that is relevant.
It's a planned economy. They'll just take a loss.
There's also there's also that. Oh God.
Legally that's a little bit, our laws, you can't set prices like that. It's you wind up in court, but globally, like they're gonna
trademark and any of those things you kind of look at as they don't apply to me. Then
look, they're going to be in Mexico, they're going to be in Canada. That's a sort of like a pincher, they're going to get here eventually, and at the end of the day, consumers are going to react to it, and so how do you, I guess, plan for that too? And I know they're terrified.
Yeah, I'm sure. And just to bring this all back together, the good thing is that for the consumer, more competition is better, especially on the front of new technology. And not for sure that it's always technology we want, like, just because touchscreens made their way into a few cars doesn't mean that 20 years later we still want everything to go towards a touchscreen.
No, touchscreens is like, that's an interesting one. Like everybody, they got cheap enough where they became a thing. But I think like that like sleek look is great until you try to use it, and then but it's really cheap. You don't have to make 6 different sets of switches and buttons, and like
for the manufacturers, it's great.
Yeah. It's and so it is like, it's again like the unintended consequences and the like, just the scope of things. There's so much nuance. So we're covering just a tiny sliver of it.
Yeah.
Here.
Crazy.
We could probably do a whole show on this.
You could definitely, yeah. So let us know if you want to hear us do a whole show on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to just run my mouth about it for as long as possible.
I'm happy to run my mouth through the entire show about how much I hate everything being part of a touchscreen.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm tempted to just every now and then just when I was at Ford, I wanted to actually find the person responsible for Sync 3 and be like, why is it like that? Why did you try to use it?
That's one of those, they probably had a budget, they probably had time constraints, and they did everything they could, and then they probably didn't have a job.
Well, I think what they run into as well is automakers, they will all say, like, oh, we're a tech company. Great. How are you going to attract tech talent? Well, we're going to make places outside of the automotive industry, so they all have like Silicon Valley outposts. GM does, Ford does. But you're going to pay more, And then you have to let those people like do their thing and not, you know, if you want them to develop something, if you want something as awesome as an iPhone, you got to get out of their way, man. You got to let them execute. It does, and then it's like the thing that comparing a car to an iPhone doesn't take into account is like, yeah, fine, iPhone's great. You can drop it and stuff, and nobody dies. A car is a 4,000-pound thing, and
the Mercedes I have in my driveway for review this week is 5,800 pounds.
Yeah. So it's got to work. The software it can't crash. It has to, it has to fail safe. It can't be distracting. Also, you've got, minus 40 to 150 degrees that stuff has to stand up to in the interior.
Which a phone generally doesn't.
Yeah. Like my phone gets too hot sitting on the dash sometimes. It's like, I'm going to stop charging now. I'm in the sun, which is
you want to navigate?
You're right. And so, yeah. And then you got map updates and it's a lot of stuff. All right. What's our next one?
Our next one. Okay. This is very, very recent. So the Fed cut rates by, it was 0.5%, I think, this week.
Yeah. 0.5%. Yep.
0.5%. Yep. So,
which is significant. That's a lot.
It is. It is relative. I mean, we're talking on rates from, generally 0 to 10 or maybe in the 15 range on a new car if you have the worst credit and are desperate. But 0.5% is a significant rate cut for home and auto.
Yeah, and it was the federal funds rate too. So it's like every rate is kind of based on that. Mm-hmm. So if you have a car loan and your interest rate is, I don't know, last time I actually looked at it was a long time, but it's like if it's 2% above prime. Mm-hmm. So and prime is, I don't know, 5%, which I have no idea what it is right now.
Let's say 7.
Okay,
I mean,
7.
I know federal home has come down from like 8.2 or so to in the 7s or so.
Ouch, 8.2, man.
Yeah,
it's like the 80s.
It's not good. And people listening, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I read this as
I think the last time it was up above 7 was legitimately like 2000, 2001. And then it was really low. Money was free for a long time, and then
0% on cars.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
My parents bought a few different cars at 0%. So, anyways, so the Fed cut rates by 0.5%, and the consequence of this, which is good for the buyer, is cheaper loans, cheaper leases, and it means that you're buying dollar from your work, from whatever your income is, goes further. So it's a good thing, you think, right?
Yeah, I think there's two things. So it's good for customers or consumers because you are going to start to see deals. And there's a couple of reasons why, but the loans dropping in interest rate means it's going to be less expensive for you to buy a car, because a large swath of us are not independently wealthy. We can't pay cash for our cars, so we have to borrow. And, obviously you've got an interest rate on that. Or if you have a lease, generally there's an interest rate on your lease. So that becomes less expensive. You get more for your dollar because your dollar is going more towards principal than interest. Like it's how it works. Or you can get better terms, or, whatever, lower down payment on things. So financially, all of those different little levers that change the deal, those get better. But also automakers now, depending on the product, they're sitting on a lot of inventory. So they need to move it too.
That's the point I was going to bring up. This had to happen. They have to get to the point of moving vehicles. The days on lot, I mean, for example, we're talking about Stellantis, days on lot for Jeep, one of the things that's kind of helped tank the Stellantis profit margins is that the days on lot the inventory factor is not working in their favor.
Yeah. You want a Wagoneer, you can probably get one. Pretty good deal.
Yeah, seriously. But that's where all of this goes, and that's why a rate cut, especially years on after the insanity of the COVID market, is it's it's important for the buyers, it's important for the automakers, and it's kind of one of those steps that feel a little bit like a trend towards what we consider normalcy for, the, call it 2012 to 2019 era.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I very much like when I actually went to buy a vehicle in 2021, I very much disliked the process. There was nothing inventory-wise, and what there was just, it was very expensive because nobody had anything, and it was unpleasant. And the effect of that has been, even as things eased, interest rates remained high. I think they actually went up in that period, but also the dealerships got used to getting a pretty solid margin, right? They'd get a good price for their stuff, or they'd have enough demand and not enough product. So, that basic kind of equation works out for them.
The economics was good for the automakers for a fairly long time. They would mark vehicles up, even base model vehicles, and then they'd make a ton of money on the financing if people came in and had to finance something and didn't know better and use their house financing. Yeah. So it was a difficult and interesting time.
Yeah. And it was great for dealers too, who are generally they're franchisees. So because of the anti-competition laws, automakers cannot demand that a dealership sells a vehicle for a set price. Like, because of the way they're set up as independent businesses, that would be monopolistic behavior. That is illegal. That's why, despite if you had, $30,000 MSRP, if the dealer has a ton of demand and there's no inventory, they're just going to tack on a market adjustment.
And that's what we call ADM.
Yeah.
Everybody has become so fond of loathing, which it's horrible, and it's probably most prominent in like the land of Porsche and Ferrari, but there was ADM on everything just because of like the most basic economics that you learn in high school, supply and demand.
Yeah.
That literally changed the trajectory of what we're discussing in why this rate cut matters.
Yeah, well, it had the effect of like cooling off the market, right? Like you've seen the fleet. Our fleet has continued to age. It's more than 12 years old now. Is the average age of the car on the road. I know I'm keeping my own alive. Like they're expensive. I'm getting every single friggin' mile I can.
You have
to. You do, and like honestly, if you're interested in conservation and all of that too, like. Look, I mean, it took a lot of energy and raw materials to build this thing. You might as well just run it till it turns into oxide. So, like, that by making things so expensive and difficult, it's had that secondary effect too. Like now they make a ton of profit on used cars and service, and like service is always been a driver,
is the profit driver of the dealers, and that's how it has been for a few years, and how it will be for the foreseeable future as the average age of the car continues to increase.
So I think for this one, the consequence is probably a net positive, but it really depends on what the other sides of the economy do. So core price inflation, where your general household expenses, when you strip out the things like fuel and food, which I don't know why you would strip those out, but
I mean, those are pretty important things in most people's budgets. So.
Yeah, I think the idea for stripping them out, I don't remember the exact logic behind CPI, but it makes sense when it's explained to you, and you're like, oh, okay, fine. But it still seems weird to be like, yeah, the stuff you need to survive, we're going to take that out and then base our economic projections on it. But depending on what that does, if things remain, or if things continue to get more affordable for people, they'll have more money to replace that 13-year-old car that... Not everybody has a driveway or a garage and the internal anger to fix it. So
masochistic inclination.
Yeah, and so that may actually help out the auto market too. So it depends. It's very precarious as usual, but we'll see. So the jury's still out on that one.
Yeah. It's one of those things that you can speculate about all you want, up and down, to the end of time, and then you won't really know what the good and the bad of it is until we're talking about this in 2 years,
Yeah.
5. Like,
I mean, I'm starting to see too, like some of the stuff that had been cheap, automakers have now started to raise the base MSRP on them. So if you're just going to eat up the savings that we're getting on better interest and like cheaper borrowing by cranking up the price of your car, you guys, like, aren't you worried? You're going to shoot yourselves in the foot. It's like the best example I can give, and probably just because I was kind of close to just watching it, is like the Maverick just went through its mid-cycle refresh, and usually with a mid-cycle refresh, you add some features, but that they're taking cost out of the vehicle. Like that was,
and you can usually see it. I mean, there were examples of Honda Civics and I don't know if it was 4Runners or another comparable 4x4 that I've discussed in the past, but it would go from the backseat having like nice materials on the door panels and door cards being made of leather and, good switchgear, to going to hard plastic. And that's what they have to do to keep the profits up, even though tooling's paid off.
Oh yeah. Well, everybody does it. It's the industry practice, right? You've gone through all the bugs, you've worked it out, you've settled on what the highest sort of propensity of option mix is. So you give it a little bit of a styling update. You take some stuff away. You package it a little bit differently. So now you've got a little bit more interest because you say, hey, check out the new version of XYZ. It's generally on all the same stuff. Like you said, the tooling is paid for, and the maintenance of the tooling.
For things.
And it's predictable. And at that point, when you raise the price at that point without really delivering a ton more value, you run the risk of cooling off the demand, where you do that mid-cycle refresh to get a little pop of demand. And so you got to be careful. Like raising the price from something that was closer to 24 to now kind of nudging 27, 28, you've just eaten the difference from what somebody's going to be spending with a less expensive loan. So they're in the same position and they're still looking at the numbers like, I can't make that work. So
Right. Yeah, and I mean, we could talk about the mid-cycle refresh shenanigans. That's probably another episode we should do.
Yeah, let us know.
Let us know. Yeah. But, these are like, there's the back and forth, going back to the rate cut. I mean, rate comes down, cars go up. And, you can look at one individual thing as net good or net bad, but ultimately the economy and the greater realm of factors means everything is kind of just gradually going up.
All I know is my safety valve is around the corner. There's a dealer that has a Jetta wagon. It's like a 2013, and they want it's not a TDI. It's an S. But they want like $7,000 for it, almost $8,000. I'm just like, I bet they'd take $5,500 for that thing. It's been sitting all year.
Oh, all year?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
The pictures on their site have snow in them. So,
oh, no.
Yeah. I drive by it on a daily basis, dropping one of the kids off at school. So that's my safety valve.
It's one of the things that us in the Northeast and I guess like above the mid-country line deal with. It's like you look at pictures of cars for sale in the summer and the pictures posted have snow. Or it's the dead of winter and you look at a picture of a car that was listed and it's got beautiful blooming green trees in the back and you're like, ooh, I can make a deal.
Or what's wrong with it, right? Like either or. Yeah.
There's almost no other reason other than like the horrible color combination,
No, I mean, I guess it's just like, it's a Volkswagen, it's a Jetta wagon, it's an actual wagon. So like those don't really help it out. But I don't know. I would assume that somebody would have bought it. They're handy. It's a great size. It's a good car.
Yeah.
Ish.
You won't have no problems.
No.
There's a fix for everything.
Yeah. Just throw money at it. But that actually, like this leads really well into our next short topic, because we're talking about trucks, and like with the Maverick, and if you look at pickup trucks and any of that huge segment, they're really expensive. And so clever people in places like Massachusetts and a ton of them out in the Pacific Northwest, I'm assuming by you're actually seeing a bunch of them as well, the K vehicles, because they've hit that 25-year threshold. You can import a bunch of Actis or Sandbars or those little kind of urban pickup van utility vehicles that
KEI for
not an Aspen, and I'm not an Aries or a Reliant.
Exactly. And these are the sub. Is it 660 or 600 cc?
I think it's 660.
660. Yeah. Okay, so these are they're essentially Japanese micro cars that, because of the 25-year import law, like you were saying, are now, you'll start seeing them around like you haven't before. And there was probably a game of catch-up where the government realized that people were registering them and using them as their normal vehicles and trucks, especially trucks. I mean, we see the key cars, it's K, right?
It's K. Yeah.
It's K, yeah. So, I mean, you'll see like AutoZams and whatnot.
Well, they're cool as hell. AutoZams are awesome. Like that entire class of vehicles, the AutoZam AZ1 is like, they had a Radwood up here, I think it was in 2020. And man, there was one there. That's just such a cool little car. Yeah, but the vans too, like they're handy, they're really cool, they're super efficient to run because they only have 660 cc. Like
they're light, they're small and they're light. So this was, I mean, in the 80s it was gray market, and then it was, late 90s, early 2000s, people importing Japanese cars that, like right-hand drive cars that shouldn't be here.
Lots of Skylines.
Lots of Skylines. Yeah, I mean Nissan. They were Nissians in Florida. Was what they were.
Oh, were they?
They were taking like Altima VIN tags and putting them on them. I mean, obviously brilliant.
Yeah.
But these K cars, the lawmakers, for no good reason, decided to ban them in a bunch of states, or retroactively decide that the registration was no longer allowed.
And that was the thing. The latest, being in Massachusetts, it hit our local news, where they retroactively had decided like, no, you can't have these things. And you're like, wait a second,
you paid for it, right? You registered it, you presumably have insurance and like a title for it, but by the way, no, now you have to sell it or just look at it.
Right. It just seemed like such a weird thing to pick on. Like there's not that many on the road. So you're just going to aggravate these people, and they obviously they knew how to make enough noise, but also it really pointed out that the state just didn't know what to do with them. They didn't know how to classify them and how to treat them. And so eventually, like, it finally got sorted out where they won. The owners won, and they are now, at least for now, able to be registered and insured, and you can use them in the state. So you are, like you said, they're small and light, and if you get hit by any normal car, you're dead.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
keep that in mind.
Yeah, these things are they're more side by side UTV-esque in size and not in power. Much less power than today's UTV.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing too. Is like you can go buy a side by side in the state, and those are insanely quick.
Yes, you can't register them on the street in Massachusetts, but in some states out west you can. And Maine and I think New Hampshire.
Maine and New Hampshire probably. Yeah. Like those are the freedom states. Those
definitely. Oh God, well, it's one of them. Now I'm trying to delineate my memories of where I was when I saw that, but
probably New Hampshire. New Hampshire tends to be like lightest regulation, lightest taxes. Like,
live free or die. That's
right.
The license plate says. But
right, and they're fine with either. Like you can do. You can do both.
Die. Go ahead. But to your point about there not being a lot of these things, obviously, when something small in prevalence becomes enters the radar of the government and there is no actual law surrounding it, something has to be created, or you have to put it into a category that exists. But the retroactive ban, like, all I could think when I read this the first time was, don't they have more important things to do? The scheme of the world, you know? Like,
so I will get very local here, and as a Massachusetts resident, one of the biggest issues is that our legislature is hugely opaque, to the point where we have a ballot question this November where the state auditor tried to audit the legislature, and they said no. And so it wound up on the ballot because it's one of the few states that actually things can happen in secret, and there's no records, no accountability, and that just seems wrong. And the legislature says, no, we audit ourselves, and that's sufficient. And that, to me, that's complete nonsense. So
auditing yourself is just, that is.
I mean, that's like, well, look how great I did. Like,
right.
Come on.
Yeah. Everybody clap for me. No.
Right. So
one branch of the government is asking to audit the other, and vice versa, and they're saying no. It's because there's something
it's
they
just
don't want them to see. There's no other rationale.
For all that it's like this liberal birthplace of democracy, Massachusetts has a ridiculously slow and dysfunctional state legislature where they just don't get anything done until the very end of the session. And then they rush around and they do a bunch of stuff, and then important things get left by the wayside because they didn't have time to do it. It's very frustrating as a citizen and a taxpayer of the state. We'll leave it at that.
It sounds like it, but at least you could walk away from this one with the K cars as that being a win. You got that. So go ahead and buy your AutoZam.
Yeah.
And if you want to live through any at all kind of traffic accident, don't, please.
I mean, like traffic around here is so stop and go. I wouldn't get it up on like Route 128 or the Zakin Bridge there on 93. Yeah,
like,
no, I wouldn't
do that. On 495.
Yeah, no, I would not do that. But on surface roads around here, there's gridlock most of the time. You're okay. You're fine.
Yeah. I mean, people have Can-Am Spiders and Rikers and stuff like that, which is probably comparably.
Yeah.
Fatality rate.
Yeah.
Well, that got ominous. Sorry, everybody.
No, that's fine. All right. Yeah. So for now, go ahead. It was effective September 18th. You can now register your K car, and if you had one already registered in Massachusetts, you can still rest assured that it's legal as the Registry of Motor Vehicles forms its plans for conducting a formal study. So right there, that's never going to happen. They're making a plan to do a study. Like that right there, that's 15 years.
I'll say the same thing. Doesn't the government have more important things to do?
Yes.
2,000 K cars across, the country that are registered and used on a semi-regular basis.
Right.
They're not doing anything to hamper anybody's way of life.
Nope. Nope. Build some affordable housing, guys. Like real affordable housing, not market rate developments with like big developers. Put your energy to that.
And healthcare, and also healthcare. But
yeah, healthcare would be nice too.
Good healthcare would be nice. Okay. Yeah, beat that one to death.
Yeah. All right. Let's. We got one more, right? Speaking of beating things to death.
Yeah, quick one. So we are recording this on Sunday, September 22nd. And last Friday, Amazon released the final episode of the Grand Tour, which really is it's the end of the holy trinity of Clarkson, Hammond, and May, at least as we know it. They'll inevitably try to do something else, but it'll probably be they'll shoot themselves in the foot, or Clarkson will
shoot off his mouth. Yeah.
Yeah, say something that really doesn't get along with everybody. But we just wanted to pay homage to it because it's not an unimportant landmark, and for a lot of us, and especially in the automotive media side of things, Top Gear and the legacy of the three of those hosts is really what formed both an enormous love of all things cars, like travel and adventure, but what also help steer a lot of us into professions and livelihoods and, and wild chases and goosebumps to live a life where you can actually have, some semblance of auto in your everyday. So I won't say anything about the last episode.
I haven't watched. I honestly, I thought they were gone already. So that's how much I paid attention to it. But I will say, like you said, it's an important formative thing. I was going to ask you, actually, is there one thing that you learned about, like something awesome that you learned about from Top Gear that you had no idea about now? And it's like sort of like a core thing that you're still just like, oh, that's so great. Like,
that's a good one. From Top Gear itself, probably slow car fast, slow car fun.
Okay.
Was a good one, because not that starting a reasonably priced car had anything to do with normal people. That was literally celebrities placed in a normal everyday car. But I think for a lot of people, it introduced that notion that you don't have to have something exotic and expensive to have a good time.
That's a good one.
What about you?
They did a deep dive, and this was years ago. This is one of the episodes before they even wound up really getting carried in the States. I think Speed was still around as a network. But they would do, profiles. So they did one on like the TR6, which was cool. But the one that I had only known a little bit about, the Rover P6, which I was like, that's kind of a cool looking car. That car is bonkers. Like, just the amount of engineering in it and just the way they did things is so unique. And there's so few of them here in the country that now, like, it put that car on the radar for me. And so it was just like, it's a neat car. It's a neat evolution, because you have, because all the entire P range, it was the end of the line, but it just gave me a much more, a greater appreciation for that car. And it was a Clarkson kind of profile. So it was old Clarkson, like entertaining to listen to. And his shtick got a little bit threadbare, but it was good at that point.
And you have an inclination towards old, weird, quirky cars. So
absolutely.
That is a trifecta right there for you. But
yeah, I like weird shit.
That's what Hooniverse is. That's the summation right there.
And maybe that's what we should call the podcast, the weird shit out.
We like weird shit.
Yeah.
Jeff, let us know. So yeah, we won't drag the Grand Tour funeral out any longer, because the Grand Tour obviously did feel a little bit like a funeral, a prolonged funeral for Top Gear. So give it a watch. Let us know what you think. And
yeah. I think I would like to know whether I should actually invest my time in watching it or not. I think I have Amazon Prime, so I can watch it.
Can you watch things? You know how on a podcast you can listen to stuff in like 1.5
Oh,
speed?
yeah, that's a good question.
Watch things, because there is obviously amazing cinematography, but the banter and actual breadth of information that comes out of the Grand Tour isn't the same. It felt much more like just an entertainment show than a car show, which, I mean, they were trying to appeal to a much broader audience than Top Gear ever did. Amazon, BBC,
Yeah, well, and it went through all the different objectives, right? So the BBC had their thing in mind, and they had their particular budgets. That's a very expensive show to produce, and so as it moves around from owner to owner, you wind up with a corporate owner who's not going to pay for it the way the BBC did. So,
right. So, and on that note, it's time to end. No.
We should actually we take a couple of minutes. Yeah. I'm not back in press cars, but you seem to have a pretty good driveway at the moment. So, yeah, it would be great to get some opinions of what you're driving, and kind of what you think of them.
Happily. So, I am very gracious to be on the press car rotation, And Dan, also very curious to hear your thoughts on the outside from about some of these cars.
Sure.
So I had 2 press cars last week, which is not usual.
We should all be so lucky.
Abnormality. Toyota operates its own fleet in the greater New York area, so I had long ago requested a Land Cruiser presser because I'm a Toyota guy. I have a Land Cruiser Prado that's dressed up as a Lexus. I've had a bunch of 4Runners, and I think probably one of the biggest, like, quote unquote, internal debates inside a car community over the last few years has been this whole, is the new Land Cruiser actually a Land Cruiser question? And one of the first press vehicles I actually ever had was a Land Cruiser Heritage Edition, which was like the final run of the 200s with the V8 and the full-size chassis. And the Land Cruiser that's on sale today in 2024 is on the light, quote-unquote, light-duty Land Cruiser chassis. So really wanted to just get some seat time, get a feel for it, and see how it compares to my GX and also the 4Runners, and see if it feels like a real Land Cruiser. And I don't want to spend too long on this. I'll have a review up on the website. But it does feel like a real Land Cruiser, because the mark of a Land Cruiser is that it feels like it will last. And it feels like you can drive it over not anything. It's not going to tackle the Rubicon trails, hardest obstacles, but it feels like you could drive it on dirt roads or through any condition or on dirt for its entire life, and it won't care. And it's not as big as the last Land Cruiser, and it doesn't have a V8. Like, there's a ton of argument over whether the iForce powertrain is actually a 25-year powertrain like the 5.7 liter V8 was. But it feels like a Land Cruiser. At the end of the day, it feels like something you can shuttle your family around, you can off-road, you can take skiing, and it'll start every single time, and it'll be comfortable, and it looks good. And
I do love the way it looks. I think so. Let's get this out of the way. Whatever the hell Toyota says a Land Cruiser is, that's what a Land Cruiser is.
If the head design, the guy that leads the Land Cruiser project says it's a Land Cruiser, it's a Land Cruiser. They've signed off on it. They're not going to throw away, 70 years of lineage for the sake of marketing. That's not how the company operates.
Yeah,
so
and
I'm glad you like the way it looks. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, but I think you're seeing them do the research about their users, and they've made trade-offs. I did read the comparison in Car and Driver with the new Land Cruiser, whatever the Lexus version of it is. Yeah,
they did GX 550 Overtrail against, was it the 130?
It was the Defender. Yeah, it was Defender 110. And
outbound.
Yeah.
Outbound.
Yeah. And basically it was a draw. It was just like, well, the Defender is a little bit more capable in these certain situations that you're never going to be in, and the Land Cruiser is capable in these other certain situations that you're never going to be in. But it seems like they made the compromise with the Land Cruiser to really deliver value for the way people are using it, which is not really off-road, not in this market. So if you want the rough and off-road focused ones, go to a different market. They're going to have different models. They're going to be equipped slightly differently, and the capabilities will be a little different. And if you want to off-road it, good for you. There's an aftermarket there for it, and it's going to be fine.
Right. And as a business proposition, which every vehicle is, lineage, nameplate, history, all of that included. I have Good Car, Bad Car up, which is kind of the authority on vehicle sales. In 2021, which was technically the last, real year of the 200 series Land Cruiser in the States, they sold 3,700 for the year.
Yeah, they lost money on that. Every single one they lost money on.
2005 is the first year they report, and it's 4,870. 4,870 units sold for the year. And in 2024 already, they have sold almost 16,000.
So, there you go. I mean, that's the new model bump. We'll see what it does in ensuing years, but that's pretty good. And they're probably still losing money on it in this market.
Cost $55,000 to $75,000 instead of $92,000 to $98,000.
Yeah, like it's a better deal, right? Like you're getting more value. You're getting still a Land Cruiser. They've adjusted what's in it. They've brought the cost down to something that more people can reach for. It doesn't overlap quite as much with Lexus. Like there's a lot of good thoughts.
I mean, this is the first time that a Land Cruiser and a Lexus share what is really the same platform in the States.
Yeah.
But it does have that engine differentiation from the GX550. This is a 2.4 turbocharged four-cylinder with the hybrid powertrain, and the Lexus is a twin-turbo V6.
Which is that's like the Tundra powertrain. So you can't really lose.
That's true. Yeah, unless you have one of those first 110,000 of those engines, which they are replacing because they're standing by their products. But
let's be clear. The Toyota replaced the frames on Tacomas. This is again 10 years ago, but they were replacing the frames on trucks that were well out of warranty, way old because they had a product. Like they had a problem. That's it's crappy they had a problem, but they stood by it. So
and that's why a lot of the news outlets right now are making this huge hullabaloo about the Tacoma stick shift being failing, and it's having the whole transmission has to be replaced in a lot of the new 4th gen Tacomas, but they're gonna fix them and repair them, versus I love Jeep. I'm not saying this as anybody trying to hurt Jeep, but you probably have heard about the little issue they have with the clutches that were causing fires.
Just a little
small problem. So it's give and take.
I mean, every automaker has their own set of issues. I got warned really hard. Hey, don't buy Stellantis products. I got 2 in the driveway, and they haven't been trouble free, but they haven't been any more trouble than anything else really. I mean, I had 2 Volvos before that. They both had Toyota transmissions. So my S60s had the AW55, notorious for blowing up in the S60s. And Volvo didn't stand by them that way. I paid for transmissions in that case. So,
right.
It just happens.
Goes so far once you're out of warranty.
Yeah. But it's one of those things it's not going to be entirely smooth sailing, or you shouldn't expect it to be. It's a very complex product. Mm-hmm. And it at a certain point, it's design. Every design choice and every engineering choice is a compromise. Mm-hmm. No matter how much testing they do, something's going to go sideways. Whatever. Budget for it.
Yeah. So just to wrap up the Land Cruiser commentary, it's not perfect. It doesn't sound very good. Obviously, it's a 2.4 liter 4-cylinder. On what planet would it? And so many people are going to look at it and think, oh, I can get a Toyota version of the Defender because it kind of looks like the Defender with the circle headlights on a couple of the models, but it still does ride like a body-on-frame truck, which the Defender isn't. And that's a compromise a lot of people will be shocked by. It does ride like a 4x4, like what a lot of us who grew up in real 4x4s still think of.
And some people like that,
I'm fine with it, obviously. My Land Cruiser Prado.
I like the squishier, cushier ride, but I'm old and therefore soft. So
yeah. So I got 2 more cars to talk about, and I'll go through them quickly. The new Mini Countryman John Cooper Works. So the bigger.
That's the BMW X1.
For all intents and purposes, it's an X1. So I will say, it looks huge. There's all these tropes and discussions on the internet about how Mini's not Mini anymore, and it's.
But it's the Countryman. It's supposed to be the big Mini. So fine, whatever. It's still not that big.
And the interior is pretty cool. It has the huge center infotainment speedometer and nothing else other than like a tiny little heads-up display. So the interior.
They don't have a screen in front of you anymore? Like
no screen in front of you. No. Just a heads-up display that is like right at the base of the windshield. And they have like a backlit dashboard that has this weird stitched texture to it. It's worth pulling up a picture of. And it drives weird. I don't have any other real way to describe. Like, it torque steers like crazy, even though it's all-wheel drive, which is not ideal.
Maybe that's for the performance feeling.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It needs more rear bias, but it's an interesting car. It was expensive. It was like $52,000, which again, X1.
Yeah.
Terms. And it was. I really need to think about it more before I deliver more of a context and discussion about it. I don't think I've ever driven anything like that. It felt like it was trying to be so many things and didn't do any of them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so I was going to say, it sounds like you didn't love it.
But I also did. It was just like a good rowdy time,
So I think that's, what might help too is this is the Works, the John Cooper Works, versus the regular one. Like how rowdy is the regular one? And that might be a little bit of the determining factor, because the JCW is supposed to feel that way.
Yeah, and it just goes like a little bit of a bridge too far.
Yeah,
like it has seats with fixed headrests.
I hate that.
Which for a daily, just no.
Yeah,
like if you get an S and then do a tune and an exhaust, you'll have as much power, and I think that's probably the way to go. This thing, it crashed over,
Oh, yeah.
Impacts, which
I want to give BMW credit though for, like we said, right? It's an X1, but it's really different looking. It looks very mini.
Oh, yeah.
They did a fantastic job making this look like it should. I think it looks like it's supposed to. It's evolved the style. It's a little bit more squared off, which is kind of right for the Countryman. I pulled up a picture of the interior. I love actually the new version of the central instrument where it doesn't really have a bezel on it. It's just the screen goes all the way to the edge, which is cool.
Yes. Yeah, it's kind of like a mirror, like a frameless mirror in screen form, which is neat, except you have to do all the HVAC in the screen.
Yeah, I mean, so that's nice. I see what you're saying with the dash where it has like the fabric and then the lighting behind the fabric. That's cool. Like that's one of the things that's always been awesome about Mini is how expressive the design is and how they really thought about it. And
yes.
I remember watching some branding videos where they talked about the Clubman and different product, but they were like, the Clubman has this personality of the cool uncle. And I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. Like, it's a little weird and a little bit kind of like high-minded, but I don't know. So I would like to drive the Countryman and see. It's always been sort of one of the best minis besides the electric. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, they only had so much to work with. I think they did a pretty good job, and I probably would agree that the John Cooper Works is probably too much. Yeah,
it's a bridge too far for people, at least people in the Northeast, just based on the ride quality and the.
Yeah, we have terrible roads here. That would be another thing that they should do with our tax money.
Do that too. Yeah, well, let's we can do a whole show on that.
Yeah.
God.
That's why I drive trucks.
Yeah, but the Countryman, I need more thought on it because it left a few days ago and I still think about it and I really liked spending time in it, but there were some things about it that just didn't.
Just like parked. Like it's spending time parked.
I like sitting in it and looking at it as much as I like actually.
There are some cars like that. So what replaced it?
Oh God, you want to talk about a bridge too far? What replaced it is the. And let me just read this so I say it in the right order.
Oh boy.
The Mercedes-AMG S63E Performance.
Yeah, that's a lot of letters and numbers.
Yeah, it's also a 5,700 pound car.
So what's the verdict though? Is it good or bad?
A little of both.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. It doesn't feel like a full AMG car, and it doesn't feel like a true. You don't get the real full-fledged S-Class experience because it's too heavy, doesn't have enough sidewall, and it doesn't feel like a full-fledged AMG experience because it's too heavy. And the exhaust on the loudest setting is still a little too quiet. So it's something. I'll say that much. It's $222,000.
Okay, that's breathtaking.
That's a house.
That's
Not here.
yeah.
Not in
No, that's it's less than half a house here, but
yeah. So
it's a decent mobile home up in Maine.
yeah, in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, you could definitely get like a nice little cabin for the money of this car. But it definitely it cruises on the highway like nothing else.
Yeah, I bet.
Dude, once you sit it at like 70, it is a missile. And it is not slow. I will say that much.
I think, yeah, I would love to hear how it does when you use it for its intended use, which is you got to take it and blast around FDR Drive and back up West Side Highway and then back over.
Right.
You might as well just go up and grab the new Tappan Zee and just,
Yeah, the Cuomo.
I'm sorry, the Cuomo, yes.
I think that's called the unofficial New York Auto Show test loop.
It has merit. I mean, you could hit the Sawmill or the Taconic, too, to see how it does.
Or the Merit.
Yeah, or the Merit, yeah.
Which I did today. So, yeah, it is definitely...
Classic Q-ship.
Yeah, and I mean, if we're being honest, it has the complexity that a $220,000 car should. It's the most complicated powertrain on sale today between the twin turbo V8 and the electric motor and the way they pair with each other.
Is it smooth and like doing all the handoffs nicely? That's one thing I will.
The smoothest of any handoff I've experienced.
Nice.
And the base price of this is $180, which crazy. The base price, but I will.
That's the cost of a nice addition. You'd pay that for the garage to put it in.
Yes, but okay. In terms of talking about handoff, time to poo-poo BMW a little bit. The $180,000 XM that I drove last year was the least smooth transition between electric and gas that I've experienced.
Really? Have you been in a Grand Cherokee 4xe? Because I bought one and it's fine. I actually quite like it, but it's clumsy sometimes. So yeah. You'd think that by now they'd have that figured out, but
yeah, man, the stuff we do for cars, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, I mean I think we'll catch back up next time we do another episode. We're trying to keep these down in length, which we didn't really exactly succeed today, but we did good.
We failed. We were shooting for a half hour, and I think going forward, once
we'll get there.
Tighten this up, I think a half hour. I think it's what everybody wants to hear.
Yeah, we'll get there. No, it was great. I think we covered everything in our little list. I don't have to talk about what I'm not driving. It would be great though. Like I know we've asked just a couple times throughout the body of the show for any kind of suggestions, questions, comments.
Feedback.
Absolutely though. Please let us know what's right, what you'd like more of, and we'll fine-tune from there.
Yep. And like I say in my post that'll come out with this on Hooniverse, preemptive thank you to everybody that is listening now and that's new and that's come from the old show or come from Dan's prior endeavors, or my couple little shenanigans, and thanks to Jeff for letting us do this.
Yeah, thanks for the keys, Jeff. Thanks for listening, and we'll hear from you next time around.
Thanks, Dan.
This podcast is as much yours as it is ours, so let us know what you like. You can suggest topics, share your thoughts with us, just comment, hit us on social, whatever. You know how to reach us. Also, check the post for source links and show notes. We've included links to the excellent reporting about both Teds and the full story of Vermont's billboard ban. Music cuts for this episode are Blackout by Beat Mechanic, licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 international license, and RF Walking on Air by Legacy Ally, licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 international license. The interview clip of Ted Pelkey is from reporting by Mike Doherty and Aidan Quigley for vtdigger.org.